Listening to Free Association on Revolution Radio. My name's Dennis Barker. Don't really have an agenda for this week. I just thought we'd do some emotional freedom technique and see where we go from there. So I wanted to talk a little bit about the first part of the setup for emotional freedom technique, which is a scale of 0 to 10. It's called a SUDS scale. It's a subjective units of distress scale. So it's a way of working out how distressed you might be in the moment on a scale of 0 to 10. And there's a little bit on Wikipedia that I thought I might read out. So Wikipedia says a subjective units of distress scale, or SUDS, also called a subjective units of disturbance scale, is a scale of 0 to 10 for measuring the subjective intensity of disturbance or distress currently experienced by an individual. The individual self-assesses where they are on the scale. The SUDS may be used as a benchmark for a professional or observer to evaluate the progress of treatment. In desensitization-based therapies such as those listed below, the patient's regular self-assessments enable them to guide the clinician repeatedly as part of the therapeutic dialogue. Well, I'm not doing therapeutic dialogue here. I'm doing emotional freedom technique on the radio, but the SUDS scale is still useful because it's about recording the intensity of what you're feeling now. So it's a way of recognizing something. It's a way of recognizing an emotion or a situation in your body that you might not have noticed before. So if your muscles were tight, if you've got your fist clenched or something like that, might indicate a higher level of intensity of the feeling than you might be registering consciously. So body language can be important with this as well, but it's really self-assessment. It's a way of guiding people through. All right, mate, thanks for the confirmation. I assumed that probably was live, but you can't always tell. I'm just going to keep going until something comes into my head to talk about. I didn't get much sleep last night, so I might be a bit groggy, but we're doing all right. I've got some hummus that I was going to eat that I didn't actually get around to doing. I've been out and sat in the square around the corner for an hour or so this afternoon, got some sun. I live around the corner from a biomedical research facility, which is attached to the university. It's called the Center of Life. They do genetic research and things like that there, research into genetic diseases. But it's built like a town square. So it's buildings around 4 sides with an archway to get in. A couple of gay bars on one side on the ground level, and offices above, and a club. On there as well. So I was sat there for for about an hour, just trying to download an update from my phone, which didn't work. Tried a couple of times, didn't work. Just technology, nothing to worry about. I've got a little bit of an echo going on, and I don't know why, but not to worry. Maybe I need to switch that off. Probably do need to switch that off. There we go. But at least I know I'm on the air. So I didn't get much sleep. I got a bit excited about websites last night. So I was watching some videos about WordPress and the new editor that they're putting into WordPress. This is not specifically philosophy, but there is a philosophy behind WordPress, so I can talk about that for a few minutes. So WordPress is an open source software, which means that it's, yeah, there's two Dennises. WordPress is open source software, which means it's community developed, or at least originally it was community developed. More recently, it's been driven by one or two or three specific companies that have got a commercial interest in developing it in particular directions. So it tends to veer off in one direction when WordPress.com's got some investment to put in, and then when somebody like 10up or Modern Tribe have got something that they want in there, they'll pull it in a slightly different direction. So there's a little bit of tension there in the community, but it works reasonably well. But they've got a new kind of block editor, they call it, which is a completely different way of doing things to the previous way of doing things. So it's had to shift about 180 degrees to make it much more visual and much more intuitive for people who don't know anything about programming. Whereas previously it's got a lot of programmer specific kind of access points, for want of a better phrase, that you can access through programming, whereas the new way of doing things is much more visual and intuitive, and it's being user tested as it goes along to make it specifically efficient ways of doing things in terms of the user interface. Anyway, I got excited about that last night, which means that I ended up all right. I still quite like WordPress. I wasn't on WordPress.com though. I've got my own hosted sites on there. I tend to mess them up when I'm playing, because I tend to put 100 plugins in there, and the plugins don't always play nice with each other, and it tends to break the sites. But it's just for fun, so I kind of do it to express myself a little bit. But so messing about with plugins is one of the things that I do, and messing about with WordPress sites. So I got excited and I set up, and I've already got 2 set up now, and I set up another one last night, but it meant that I was awake till about 4 o'clock in the morning. I might have got an hour's kind of rest, and then the sun comes up at about 6, so I didn't get a huge amount of sleep. Anyway, back to the emotional freedom technique. What I thought we might do is I'll focus a little bit on guilt, I think. Guilt and anger. Anger's still there. And the website, I'll put the website address in there. So the old one is Reiki Initiation. Reiki Master Initiation it is. Let me do that properly. That's the Reiki website. That one's been there off and on for a couple of years, but I keep breaking it, so I have to start rebuilding it again. And I got distracted with the Philosophy Society website in the meantime a couple of years ago as well. So it tends to have a little bit of philosophy on there as well. Yeah, so emotional freedom technique starts with the subjective units of distress scale. So if we're looking at something like guilt, it can be in the moment, or if you're remembering a time where you felt guilty about something. For me, that's probably going to be going back to about 14, because I was brought up Catholic. I let go of Catholicism when I was about 14 or 15, but I felt quite guilty about it. And I had to really kind of make a a decision about dropping guilt, because I decided that guilt wasn't an emotion that was in any way useful for me. So nobody told me I couldn't just let go of it, so I just let go of it. So if we take guilt as a starting point, and then I'll work through a little bit of anger later on, but for the time being, so on a scale of 0 to 10, if I'm thinking about when I was 14, and I was doing my best to find a way to let go of the religion that I've been brought up in, which has got a lot of guilt associated with it. Catholicism tends to emphasize the guilt a little bit or bring it out. And I decided I didn't want to do that. So before I let go of it, I was about 7 on the scale. So I was quite anxious. I was quite a nervous teenager. So everything affected me. I was very sensitive as a child, very sensitive as a teenager. I still am, really. But guilt isn't something that I wanted to carry around with me, so I decided to let go of it. And then one day I just let go of it. So this is kind of a process that does the same thing. Well, you have to make the assumption that you can let go of it first. So that's one of the philosophical assumptions, is that you can let go of the attachment to old guilt or more recent guilt, or guilt associated with family or with religion. So we'll just go through a round of emotional freedom technique. So the tapping, the way I do it is using 3 or 4 fingers of my right hand on the inside of my left hand, and just tap. Think about being in a situation where you are feeling guilty, or a particular social institution that was bringing that out. For me, it's the Catholic Church, but it can be almost anything. And we'll just go through that. So I've got to remember back to being 14. So even though I'm in a situation where I'm institutionally guilty, I'm feeling guilty as part of the religious upbringing that I didn't have any choice about, even though that's in me and I can sense it, and it's a feeling that's there, I wholly and completely love, honor, and accept myself. Even though I didn't have any control over how I was brought up, or what religion I was brought up in, or the belief systems that I was brought up in, I wholly and completely love, honor, and accept myself. And just take a breath and see if the memory brings up anything else. And for me, it's a long time ago, so it doesn't really bring up that much. But it could bring up some anger. So it would have brought up anger at the time when I just decided to make the break. So even though I'm angry about being made to feel guilty by the society that I've been brought up in, I wholly and completely love, honor, and accept myself. So just take a breath and tune in again. I think I'm probably down to about a 5 now, if I'm remembering. If there's anything still residually sat there, it'll come up. as you dig into these things, different feelings come up. So between guilt and anger, we can probably go through another round a bit later on, because there's bound to be something comes up for me. But we were talking about HIV a few minutes ago in the chat room, and I wanted to maybe bring up some things that I did about 20 years ago. I was had some time on my hands and I had some money in the bank at the time. So I'd just done my Reiki training. So I volunteered to do one afternoon a week at the local HIV centre for about a year, nearly a year. And most of what I was doing down there was selling it to people. It was explaining what it is to people, because they didn't really know. So the management of the centre suggested to a couple of people that they have sessions, and they agreed to it. And I did a couple of sessions the first week, I think. One session the first week, then two the second. I used to sit in the coffee room in the social area and just talk to people until somebody decided they wanted a Reiki session. Because it's not my place to impose it on people. It's just like, I'll tell you what it is. You decide whether it's a good thing for you or not. So most of what I was doing for the afternoon was sitting around drinking coffee and just talking to people. But an hour session and then a couple of hours session, and usually between 2 and 3 people in the afternoon. So sometimes it would be sessions just because they're stressed about something. Sometimes it would be sessions for people who are wanting to move house, wanting to change where they live. So I used to do visualization sessions with people to help them to see the house that they wanted to live in. Talked one guy through each room in the house that he wanted to live in, and he moved about 3 or 4 weeks later, I think. So he got him there. He got him what he wanted in terms of furniture and in terms of the location, just because I've been through a visualization that described that, or left space for his mind to come up with that. So I used to work as well, if I'm remembering back, I used to work with a kind of heads-up display. I used to get some kind of like visual image of like dials and like a mixing desk with LEDs going on and off. It's all a bit strange. But I remember one session where I was doing quite deep work with somebody, and I literally had a heads-up display in front of me, and I could see what I was doing at each part of his energy field on this heads-up display. It's very, very weird. I've only had that. I had that for about 3 months, and then it went. I don't know where it came from or why it was there or why it went, but it was an interesting way to work in terms of putting energy into somebody's energy field. For people who don't know, Reiki is a hands-on energy channeling therapy of sorts. It comes from Japan. It's based in Buddhism, but it doesn't have any real Buddhist belief systems associated with it. Although in the background there is non-duality and there is Buddhism, but it's not foregrounded at all. Harry, there's some benefit to religion. I know that there's a lot of disbenefits as well. There's a lot of things about organized religion that I don't like, and I've been anti for a long time. Anti-organized religion, but there are some benefits. There's a social structure there, and there's social support there that people need. So I'm okay with organized religion a bit more than I was. A few years ago, at least. I wouldn't have gone near any organized religion a few years ago, and now I'm a bit better with it. Couldn't even really do organized Buddhism. I had to just do my own path. But there's two meditation centers within easy walking distance of me where I'm living at the moment. There's one that isn't specifically Buddhist, another one that is, on the same street on Westgate Road in Newcastle. I haven't been to either of them yet, but they're both on my list. And I know there's a Tibetan Buddhist centre about 3 miles up the road, and I'm living opposite a Catholic cathedral. So religion, even though I don't particularly like it, it's still something I'm interested in. It's still something I'm integrating to some extent. So I don't have any issues with people being Christian or Buddhist or Muslim or pagan or whatever, as long as they're behaving in a way that's reasonably respectful. It's when people start throwing their weight around that I don't really like it, don't really put up with it. And I tend to just walk away. I tell them what I think of them and then just walk away, because it's not worth getting into a row about it. And you find sometimes that the people who've been deeply involved in organized religion and then left are the people who are like violently anti-religion. They become evangelical atheists, at least for a while. I know two people like that who were very, very Christian, brought up Christian, embedded in the Christian church, evangelical Christian churches. And when they go anti, they swing completely 180 degrees in the other direction and become evangelical atheists, which is interesting because it's a dialectic, it's a swing, and then a swing back to the middle. So it becomes, and that's kind of what I did. I left Catholicism at 14. Was completely anti-organized religion until about 14, 15 years later. Got to about 30, 31, and I started thinking about looking at Buddhist meditation to de-stress myself a little bit. So I did for the sake of argument, I did 15 years Catholic, 15 years anti. I've done about another, well, that would take me 30, 45, would be for another 15 years. Didn't quite do 15 years as Buddhist or pagan or New Age. Did about 7. And then I've had 7 years where I've been neutral. And now I've swung back into looking at Buddhism and Christianity and looking for the similarities. And there are some interpretations of Christianity that have got a lot of Buddhism informing them. So somebody like Neville Goddard, somebody like Joseph Murphy, who I've talked about a little bit on here, have both got a Hindu and Buddhist kind of philosophy behind what they're interpreting the New Testament to be, which puts Christ in people. So everybody is the Christ according to Joseph Murphy and according to Neville Goddard. It's something that everybody's an incarnation of Christ, which is something that I like. It's the idea of that I like, because it doesn't. I'm not good with excluding people, and I'm not good with hierarchies. So if everybody's Christ, that's an idea that I can buy into. And it's an approach that informs what I'm doing at the moment as well. Yeah, there's a lot of hating other people floating around at the moment. There's a lot of issues around boundaries. So it's the Mars-Saturn conjunction, I think, has produced a virus that's basically attacking boundaries. It's setting up a need for strong boundaries. So for me, the whole virus thing is the Mars-Saturn conjunction. It's interesting how that's impacting people. I've only been out for an hour today so far, so even though it's still quite sunny here, yeah, I'm getting used to the idea that I don't necessarily need to be outside. Although it's tricky sometimes, particularly I'm living in a block of flats, and I've got a Chinese family downstairs, and every now and again they'll have a big family gathering, and they put the karaoke on at about 8 o'clock in the evening. It could be during the week or it can be a Saturday, and they crank up the karaoke, and it's just horrible. It's just awful. If there's one thing that I really don't want to have downstairs, it's Chinese karaoke. But that's where I am, so I have to get used to the idea. I was annoyed the first time. I did get annoyed the first time that went on. That was a Saturday evening. And I ended up just taking my washing over to the laundry room and sitting in the laundry room for an hour and calming down, watching my laundry go round and round in circles. And then they were still going at 11 o'clock that night. So I threw a complaint into the housing association that I'm renting from, and they just bounced it straight back and said sort it out via the council, because the council will measure the noise level. It was ridiculous, so I wish I'd had a recording of it, because it was totally ridiculous. And there's been a couple of other occasions where that's happened, but I've worked out how to deal with it now. The main issue is that probably this flat was empty for about 3 or 4 months before I moved into it, so they've assumed that the flat upstairs is empty and they can do what they like. So I had to let them know that there's somebody in the flat. So what I did was put a bit of Iron Maiden on, a bit of Hallowed Be Thy Name and Number of the Beast, Live from Rio, I think it was, and a bit of Queen's Greatest Hits and a bit of Pink Floyd, and cranked that up so that I couldn't hear the karaoke downstairs. And that's just a very simple way of letting people know that there's somebody living upstairs without causing any kind of conflict. And they've got used to the idea now, and they've started to turn the karaoke down a little bit, and it's less frequent. So I didn't really need to complain. There's always a way to sort things out. If you can find a way to sort it out, there'll always be a way. If you look hard enough, there's always a way. So let's just have a look and see who's in the chat room. See who we've got. We've got me, Batsman, Comet, Mer Bailey, Gino, Dumpster Diver, Harry, Dry Fly Guy, Doc Time, Mona Radler and May on my list. There's a few other people further down. I've been here about 110 minutes, it tells me, so it's longer than I was expecting to be here. Right, so as I say, I don't really have an agenda. What I might do is just put a video on that I was listening to last night. It's about 10 minutes long. Let's see what if I can find it. That's Thomas Troward, who I'm getting quite into again. He was a guy who was writing at the turn of the 20th century. And I was just into somebody reading one of his essays last night, or very early this morning. Thomas Troward essays. It's about 10 minutes. This one. This is an essay called I Am.
Essays by Thomas Troward. Number 2. The I Am. By losing sight of this truth, we surround ourselves with limitation.
Let me start that again.
2 in 1. We often do not sufficiently recognize the truth of Walt Whitman's pithy saying, I am not all contained between my hat and my boots. We forget the twofold nature of the I Am, that it is at once both the manifested and the unmanifested, the universal and the individual. By losing sight of this truth, we surround ourselves with limitations. We see only part of the self, and then we are surprised that that part fails to do the work of the whole. Factors crop up on which we had not reckoned. We wonder where they came from, and we do not understand that they necessarily arise from the great unity in which we are all included. It is the grand intelligence and liveliness of the universal spirit continually pressing forward to manifestation of itself in a glorious humanity. This must be effected by each individual through intelligent conception of its purpose, the natural laws by which that purpose is accomplished, the recognition of the only realization that he himself is none other than the thing, and participation. We need that Walt Whitman
I'm just going to read a little bit of Wikipedia on Thomas Troward. So I think Thomas Troward's an interesting guy. And he's part of the New Thought movement that was around at the end of the 19th century, beginning of the 20th. Troward was a divisional judge in British administered India. His avocation was a study of comparative religion. After his retirement from the judiciary in 1896, Troward set out to apply logic and a judicial weighting of evidence in the study of matters of cause and effect. The philosopher William James characterized Troward's Edinburgh lectures on mental science as, quote, far and away the ablest statement of philosophy I have met, beautiful in its sustained clearness of thought and style, a really classic statement. And this is according to Wikipedia. According to Alcoholics Anonymous archivist Neil Wing, early AA members were strongly encouraged to read Thomas Troward's Edinburgh lectures on mental science. And the movie The Secret also credits Thomas Troward's philosophy with inspiring the movie. He was past president of the International New Thought Alliance. So there's a few books in the bibliography. I'll just read through that. Most of these are public domain now, because they're all over 100 years old, or just about 100 years old. So the bibliography is the Edinburgh Lectures on Mental Science, which is published in 1904. The Dore Lectures on Mental Science, Dore spelled D-O-R-E, published in 1909. Bible Mystery and Bible Meeting in 1913. The Creative Process in the Individual, which is another one I was listening to last night. That was published in 1915. All of these are 1900 and something. I keep wanting to say 2000. The years 1914 to 1923 in Bible Prophecy. That was published in 1915. The Law and the Word in 1917. The Hidden Power and Other Papers on Mental Science, published in 1921. There's a list of New Thought writers. Some of these I've been listening to. There's a lot of audio on YouTube at the moment of people reading the New Thought kind of material from that part of the 20th century. 20th century. So I'll give you a little bit of a list. I'll read through some of these, the ones that I like anyway. So James Allen is the obvious one, As a Man Thinketh, which was published in 1903. You've got William Walker Atkinson. There's a couple I was listening to last night, which were, where are we? Mind Power, The Secret of Mental Magic. I think looks like a good one. Self-Healing by Thought Force, which came out in 1907. The Secret of Mental Magic, A Course of 7 Lessons. I was listening to a little bit of that last night as well. All of these things reinforce each other. So they write in a similar way with a similar set of assumptions. So James Allen and William Walker Atkinson both will reinforce the same things, which is why I like it. You don't get that internal contradiction that you sometimes get with people within a movement. They're coming from the same place, really. You got Genevieve Behrend, Your Invisible Power. I've listened to that one as well. That was quite interesting. A lot of this is quite religious, but it's also quite philosophical as well. So the language, although they'll quote from the New Testament quite a lot, you can adapt it, and it's quite symbolically interpreted anyway. So you don't have to take it completely literally, and I don't ask you to take it completely literally anyway. So Charles Fillmore's on the list, Shakti Gawain's on this list, Neville Goddard, who I've spoken about before, Charles F. Harnell, who I quite like. The Master Key System is one of my go-to books, just for reminding myself of the techniques to use for visualization and stuff like that. So I do quite a lot of visualization over the years. I've done quite a lot. I'm doing more kind of Neville Goddard's techniques at the moment, but they involve visualization, but they're also about feeling and thinking from the end, thinking from a place where what you're looking for has already happened. Napoleon Hill's on this list. Think and Grow Rich counts as New Thought. Byron Katie's on here as well. I like what Byron Katie's doing at the moment. Let's see what Wikipedia says about Byron Katie, because I wanted to talk about her at some point as well. So the work of Byron Katie is a method of self-inquiry. She came up with this because she was a mess, basically, and it helped to sort her life out a little bit. So she described, this is from Wikipedia, she describes her 1986 epiphany as follows. I discovered that when I believed my thoughts, I suffered, but that when I didn't believe them, I don't suffer, and that is true for every human being. Freedom is as simple as that. I found that suffering is optional. I found a joy within me that has never disappeared, not for a single moment. She calls the process the work, and it's about questioning stressful thoughts. So the process itself is asking for questions. So you pick the thought that's disturbing you, or the thought that's a recurring theme that comes back when you try to push it away or whatever, and then you question it. So for me, it would be like, why don't my neighbours turn the karaoke down? So it's wanting to live a quiet life. And my assumption with that is that it's possible for me to live a quiet life all the time. So the questioning process for that would be, is it true? So is it true that it's possible for me to live a quiet life all the time? Answer to that one is probably no. Second question, can I absolutely know that it's true? Again, the answer is probably no. So the third question for that assumption that I'm capable and it's possible to live a quiet life all the time. So the third question is, how do you react? What happens when you believe that thought? Well, obviously, if there's a karaoke going on downstairs and I'm made the assumption that I can have a quiet life, I'm going to get annoyed. I'm going to get angry. It's going to disturb my sense of peace, my sense of who I am. It's going to trigger me to try and protect the boundaries of my space, which in this case is my flat. And it's going to potentially lead to me putting a complaint into the housing association, which is what I did ultimately. So I did react I reacted to the assumption being proven untrue in that situation. So that's what got me annoyed. Something that I wanted to happen wasn't happening, basically. So the fourth question for this is this process of the work is, who would you be without the thought? So who would I be without the thought that I can live a quiet life all the time? I will be a little bit more okay with noise and with the psychopathic shouting that goes on upstairs and with the Chinese karaoke that goes on downstairs. So I'll be less annoyed with my neighbours. Basically, if I hadn't made that assumption, then I would be less annoyed with my neighbours, less likely to complain, less likely to react by getting angry. So that's a very simple example. It's a very, very simple example of how questioning a thought and the assumption behind a thought can kind of take the sting out of it, take the anger out of it, take the angst out of it, takes the emotion out. For me, I'm fairly used to doing this process with kind of heavier thoughts than that. So that one's easy for me, and I know the process well enough to be able to do it quite quickly. But there's an app. If you haven't done the process, or if you want to have a look, there's lots of stuff on YouTube. It's all from the early 90s probably now. There's a lot of sessions with Byron, Katie, going through the process with people, and it's fascinating. I find it fascinating because she can cut through. She's quite harsh in the way that she questions people and the way that she explores the topics that she goes into. It's quite direct and it's quite hard and it's quite brutal sometimes. But I'm all right with that. I will be all right with that style of questioning for me because I'm used to doing that internally for me as well. So I don't mind as much if it's coming from the outside. It's all just part of a process. And the questions are good. I'll just go through the 4 questions again. So the first question, the first thing is to isolate the thought. Isolate the thought that's the negative or the stressful thought. And then look at it and clarify it. See if you can come to the assumption that's being made that produces it. That's sometimes quite helpful. If not, then just question the thought. First question, is it true? Second question, can I absolutely know that it's true? Third question, how do you react? What happens when you believe the thought? And the fourth question is, who would you be without the thought? So there's another section to this as well, which is, as she describes as a turnaround, which is a philosophical reversal. It's a reversal of the point of view or reversal of the assumptions. So the example that's given on Wikipedia is the thought, my husband should listen to me. And that can be turned around to, I should listen to my husband. Or I should listen to myself. Or my husband shouldn't listen to me. So it's reversing the question, reversing the assumption. And then you look for an example of the turnaround. So look for an example of when I should listen to my husband, or I should listen to myself, or my husband shouldn't listen to me. One example of each, or more, if you can find them. They have to be genuine examples, but this is all breaking down the assumption. It's a process of breaking down sometimes hidden assumptions that people make that produce negative emotions or anger or distress. I found it very useful dealing with some issues from my childhood and my family situation when I was a child, which I won't go into. But I did find it quite useful, and it is quite direct and it's quick. So if there's things that need to be shifted quickly, the work of Byron Katie is something that I would recommend, and I do recommend people to take a look at. It might not be for you, but it's something to look at. It's one possibility. So let's have another look at the chat, what we've got going on in there. That's a good question, Crab Cake. Crab Cake in the chat room is questioning how much of what we do, how much behavior is in the DNA, and how much is in the environment. And it's always a good question. The last thing that I read was 5% of diseases are genetic, and the rest are behavioral. They're about lifestyle, they're about diet, they're about environment. So only 5% of diseases are genetic. So it's possible that only 5% of behavior is genetic as well. Most of it is responding to other people or responding to the environment. And we all respond in different ways based on childhood and upbringing and assumptions, but there's always a situation, potentially at least, where you can get into a drama, what's called a drama triangle in transactional analysis, which is another thing that's worth looking at, because there's always drama. There's always drama online. There's always drama in groups offline, in philosophy groups and psychology groups and what have you. Any group that's meeting on a Friday or Saturday night as a social group, or family reunions or whatever, there'll be drama. So I found transactional analysis and the drama triangle to be a useful model to sort some of that out in my head as well. And we're coming to the end of the show now, so I'm gonna sneak out early and let the music do its thing. I've got some hummus to eat, so I'm gonna do that. No, not coffee today. I've got hummus and I've got some classic cola, some generic supermarket classic cola, which is probably loaded with sugar. So I'm going to have a glass of that, and that'll probably do me for the afternoon. So just a reminder, you've been listening to Free Association. My name's Dennis Barker. We're on Revolution Radio, which is listener supported. So if you've got any spare change, if you can afford to give maybe $5 a month, take a look at the website at revolution.radio and follow the link to become a patron, and you can set up a monthly donation there. It's very easy to do. I'll give you the option of how much you want to donate, so there's no stress with it. It's just if you can afford it, if you want to support free speech and the content that's on the radio shows, then it's worth doing. And I'm going to call that an afternoon.